I didn't know my life was about to split in two the moment I pulled into my driveway on a random weeknight. It was somewhere between 4 and 7. My brain couldn't even pin down the time because I was running on fumes after covering someone else's shift at the distribution center. I'm a floor supervisor, which sounds stronger than it feels when your badge might as well be a 10-pound weight dragging at your chest. All I wanted was a shower hot enough to melt the day off my skin, and whatever leftovers were hiding in the back of the fridge. But the lights were on, and before I even reached the porch, I heard women talking inside, laughing. That bright, careless kind of laughter you hear when nobody thinks they're being watched. I unlocked the front door quietly, not sneaking exactly, just too tired to announce myself. And then I heard my husband's voice slice clean through the chatter. "Honestly," he said, like he was delivering a confident little verdict, "I give this thing maybe 12 more months. She's just not at my level anymore." I froze in the entryway so fast my lungs forgot what they were doing. In the living room, 4 of his friends were sprawled across our furniture. Wine bottles, glasses. That relaxed, familiar mess that said this wasn't a rare visit, this was a routine. They erupted like he'd just told the funniest joke in the world. "You've been way too understanding already," one of them said. "Seriously," another chimed in. "Way too patient." My husband sat there like he was hosting his own talk show, nodding along, soaking in the approval. Then he let out this dramatic little sigh that sent them into another round of giggles. I stood there for maybe 10 seconds. My pulse was racing, but my mind went crystal clear. You know that moment when something you've been avoiding suddenly becomes impossible to ignore? I walked into the living room. All 5 of them turned. The laughter died instantly. "Hey," I said, and I could hear how steady my voice was, even though my hands felt cold. Fascinating discussion. My husband's face drained of color, and that was the exact second I realized 2 things at once. He didn't just disrespect me. He'd been planning my exit long before I ever heard the punchline. If you'd asked me a year ago who I was, I would have answered without hesitation. A reliable woman, a steady worker, the kind of wife who held everything together, even when it wasn't glamorous. My name is Linda Karishma. I'm not the type who needs attention in a room to feel secure. I'm the type who shows up early, stays late, keeps the operation moving, even when everyone else is checking the clock. At the distribution center, that mindset is useful. Boxes don't care if you're tired. Pallets don't care if your heart is heavy. People, though, people notice when you keep saying, "It's fine," while your eyes are quietly begging for a break. I met my husband 5 years ago, and back then, I thought his confidence was a kind of safety. He wasn't cruel in the beginning. He wasn't openly dismissive. He had that polished way of talking, like he always knew the right answer, like he could make decisions without second-guessing himself. When you've spent your life being the dependable one, that kind of certainty can feel like a warm coat in winter. We met through a mutual friend at a casual get-together. Nothing romantic or cinematic. Just plastic cups, background music, people talking over each other. He made a joke about how I looked like I was mentally organizing the entire room, and I laughed, because it was true. I'd been doing that since I was a kid, watching, measuring, making sure nothing fell apart. He asked for my number that night. What surprised me wasn't the flirting. It was how consistent he was at first. Texts that came when he said they would, plans that didn't accidentally change last minute. The way he looked at me like I wasn't invisible. When we started dating, I told myself I'd be careful. I've never been the kind of woman who throws herself into love blindly. But he had a way of making effort look effortless, and that's dangerous, because you start believing it will last forever. The early months were simple. Dinners, movie nights, grocery runs that somehow felt fun because he'd lean into the cart and whisper ridiculous opinions about cereal like it was a serious debate. I remember standing in an aisle once, laughing so hard my stomach hurt, thinking, this is what peace feels like. When he proposed, it wasn't extravagant. No crowd, no staged moment, just us. He handed me a ring like he was handing me a promise. Steady, deliberate, confident. I said yes, and for a while, I lived inside the comfort of that yes, like it was a shield. We got married, moved into the rental on Morrison Street, and built routines the way couples do. Rent, utilities, groceries, work schedules, little compromises. The kind of daily life that doesn't look impressive from the outside, but is supposed to add up to something solid. And at first it did. I worked full-time and kept climbing until I became a floor supervisor. He worked part-time at a boutique downtown. He was good at it. Charming, social, always dressed like he belonged somewhere slightly nicer than the rest of us. I didn't judge the part-time thing. People take different paths, and I believed marriage was about being a team, not keeping score. So when bills came due, I covered them. When his credit cards stacked up, store cards, random charges that made my stomach tighten, he'd laugh it off, tell me it was temporary, tell me he'd handle it. And I believed him, because believing felt easier than admitting how often I was the one carrying the weight. His friends became part of the background of our life. They'd come over with wine. They'd sprawl across our couch like they owned it. They'd talk about relationships like it was entertainment, like everybody's pain was just material for a funny story. I tried to fit in. I smiled. I poured drinks. I laughed at the right moments. But over time, I noticed something. Around them, my husband's tone changed. His voice got sharper, more performative, like he was auditioning for their approval. And when he talked about me, even casually, there was a small edge to it, a little condescension wrapped in humor. I told myself I was imagining it. I told myself I was tired. I told myself it was nothing. And maybe that's the saddest part of the whole thing. How many tiny warnings I swallowed just to keep the story of my marriage feeling safe in my own head. Because by the time I heard him say I wasn't at his level anymore, it didn't come out of nowhere. It came out of a pattern I'd been excusing for far too long. The shift didn't happen all at once. If it had, I might have reacted sooner, but the way things changed between us was slow, almost polite, like a room gradually losing warmth. You don't notice until you start shivering. It started with his absence, even when he was physically there. He'd sit on the couch, scrolling through his phone while I talked about my day, nodding at the right moments without really hearing me. When I'd ask his opinion on something, nothing big, just dinner plans or a weekend schedule, he'd sigh like I was interrupting something important. "You worry too much," he'd say, smiling like it was affection. "It's not that deep." At first I laughed it off. Then there were the comments. Little ones, soft ones, the kind that can pass as jokes if you don't want to look too closely. "You're still wearing that? You're so serious all the time. You work too much. No wonder you're always tired." Each one landed lightly on its own. Together, they started forming something heavier. I noticed how differently he spoke about me around his friends. At home, I was reliable. Around them, I was predictable. At home, I was driven. Around them, I was a bit intense. They'd laugh, and I'd smile along, because what else do you do when the room is laughing and you don't want to be the problem? His friends didn't hide their opinions as much as they thought they did. One night, after too much wine, one of them leaned toward me and said, "You know, you'd be way more fun if you just loosened up." I remember gripping my glass too tightly, feeling the cold bite into my palm. "I like who I am," I said, trying to keep it light. She raised an eyebrow. "Sure, I just mean, he's changed a lot since you two got married." That sentence stayed with me, because it was true, but not in the way she meant. He started going out more, late dinners that ran long, weekend plans that didn't include me. He said he needed space to feel like himself again. I told myself that healthy couples allow space. I told myself that love isn't possession. But there's a difference between giving someone space and slowly being edged out of your own marriage. The financial tension crept in quietly, too. I'd open the bank app and see charges I didn't recognize, restaurants I'd never been to, stores I didn't shop at. When I asked, he'd wave it away. "It's my money, too," he'd say, even though most of that money came from my paychecks. "We're married. Why are you keeping score?" So I stopped asking. I covered the rent, the utilities, the groceries. I paid down his cards because interest was brutal and I didn't want us buried under it later. I told myself I was investing in our future. What I didn't realize was that he was already planning a different one. His family didn't help. They had this subtle way of reinforcing his ego, commenting on how much potential he had, how I was lucky he was so social and charismatic. His mother once said, right in front of me, "You know, men like him need room to grow. Don't clip his wings." I smiled and nodded, swallowing the familiar ache. Meanwhile, my exhaustion was becoming a permanent state. I covered extra shifts. I took on more responsibility at work. I came home to a house that felt less and less like a partnership and more like a stage where I was always playing the supporting role. There were moments, quiet ones, when I felt the distance between us stretching thin and dangerous. Late at night, lying beside him, I'd stare at the ceiling and wonder when exactly I started feeling alone next to the person who was supposed to be my home. But every time doubt rose up, I pushed it back down. Because marriage, I believed, was about endurance, about patience, about not giving up when things got uncomfortable. I didn't realize I was the only one still fighting for that version of us. And I definitely didn't know that while I was trying to save the marriage, he was quietly rehearsing the story he'd tell when it ended. Walking into the living room that night felt like stepping onto a stage I hadn't auditioned for, but somehow the script had already been written without me. The air smelled like wine and something sweet, artificial. Laughter hung in the room like smoke that hadn't cleared yet. 4 women, familiar faces, people who had eaten at my table, sat on my couch, accepted my smiles and small talk without ever seeing me as anything more than background noise. And there he was, my husband, sitting back like a man entirely at ease with what he'd just said. When I spoke, fascinating discussion. My voice sounded steady, but my body was betraying me. My fingers tingled. My shoulders felt too tight. I could feel my heartbeat in my throat. His face drained of color in a way that almost would have been satisfying if it hadn't hurt so much. "Oh," he said, forcing a laugh that didn't land. "You're back early." "Shift ended early," I replied. "Lucky me. Almost missed the entertainment." The silence was immediate and total. One of the women reached for her glass, then hesitated, like she didn't know where to put her hands anymore. I looked straight at him. "So," I said calmly, "we've got 12 months left, huh?" His mouth opened, closed, opened again. I was just... "Why wait 12 months?" I asked. The words surprised even me. They came out clean, sharp, controlled. "Let's end it right now." You could have heard a pin drop. One of his friends actually set her glass down on the coffee table, the clink too loud in the quiet. "What?" he finally managed. "You heard me." I checked my phone, deliberately, like I had somewhere else to be. "You want out? There's the door. Or I'll leave. Your choice." He stared at me like he didn't recognize the woman standing in front of him. "What are you doing?" he whispered. "You're being ridiculous." I tilted my head slightly. Ridiculous is calling your wife beneath you and expecting her to swallow it. I turned my gaze to the women on the couch. "Did I get that right?" I asked. "I'm not at his level anymore?" Not a single one of them met my eyes. Their earlier confidence had evaporated, replaced with the sudden realization that they were witnesses to something ugly and real. "That was just venting," he said quickly, his voice tight. "Everyone vents." I nodded slowly. "Right. Not at your level. That's venting." The room felt too small, too intimate, like the walls were listening. I turned away from them and headed toward the stairs. "Where are you going?" he asked, panic edging into his voice. "Packing." "You can't be serious." I stopped halfway up the stairs and looked back at him. "You just told your friends our marriage is over," I said. "Why wouldn't I be serious?" "That's not what I said." "That's exactly what you said." I kept walking. He followed me upstairs, his shoes clicking too loudly against the floor. He talked the entire way, how I was overreacting, how it was just girl talk, how I was being dramatic. I didn't respond. I went straight to the closet and pulled out my gym bag. Work clothes, underwear, socks, toiletries, phone charger. I moved on instinct, like my body had decided before my heart could catch up. "This is insane," he said from the doorway. "You're throwing away 5 years over one comment." I zipped the bag and turned to face him. "You think this is about one comment?" I asked quietly. "You spent an hour laughing about how I'm not good enough anymore." I picked up the bag. "And honestly," I continued, "you might be right. I'm not good enough for someone who talks about me like that." I stepped past him. "So let's both do better." "I didn't mean it like that," he said, his voice cracking. I paused. "Then how did you mean it?" He had no answer. By the time I reached the front door, his friends were gone. Wine glasses sat abandoned on the table like evidence no one wanted to claim. I grabbed my keys. "Where are you going?" he called from upstairs. I looked up at him one last time. "Does it matter?" I said. "This isn't my home anymore. It's just a house where my husband thinks I'm beneath him." Then I walked out. I sat in my car for a full minute, hands gripping the steering wheel, breathing through the rush of adrenaline. My chest felt tight. My eyes burned. But beneath all of it, beneath the shock, the humiliation, the grief, was something I hadn't felt in a long time. Relief. I started the engine and drove away, not looking back. Because somewhere between the laughter and the silence, my marriage had officially ended. The adrenaline didn't wear off all at once. It faded in waves, sharp one moment, hollow the next, as I drove with no real destination in mind. The road felt unfamiliar even though I'd driven it 100 times. My hands were steady on the wheel, but my chest felt tight, like something heavy was sitting there, refusing to move. I pulled off the interstate when I saw the motel sign. $49 a night. Vacancy. I didn't think. I just turned in. The room smelled like old carpet and cleaning chemicals, the kind that tries too hard to cover what's been there before. But it had a bed, a lock, silence. Good enough. I sat on the edge of the mattress with my gym bag at my feet, staring at the wall. My phone buzzed, then buzzed again, and again. His name lit up the screen over and over. I didn't answer. Instead, I turned the phone face down and pressed my palms into my thighs, grounding myself in the moment. My breathing was shallow, uneven. My body hadn't caught up with what my mind already knew. This wasn't a fight. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was the end of something that had been quietly dying for a long time. I replayed the night in fragments. The laughter, the way his friends wouldn't look at me, the confidence in his voice when he said I wasn't at his level. What hurt the most wasn't the insult itself. It was the ease with which he said it, like it had been rehearsed, like it had been true in his mind for a while. I kicked off my shoes and lay back on the bed, staring up at the ceiling. There was a water stain shaped vaguely like a map, somewhere I'd never been. Tomorrow, I told myself. I'll deal with everything tomorrow. Sleep came eventually, heavy and restless. I woke at 6:15 a.m. to my phone vibrating like it was possessed. 23 missed calls, 47 messages, all from him. I scrolled through them while the motel's coffee maker gurgled in the corner, filling the room with the bitter smell of cheap grounds. The messages swung wildly: anger, denial, apologies, accusations, more apologies. You're being dramatic. We need to talk. This isn't fair. I didn't mean it like that. Please come home. The last message, sent at 4:30 in the morning, was just one word: please. I stared at it longer than the rest. Not because it moved me, but because it felt too late. Life, unfortunately, doesn't pause for emotional implosions. I had a shift at 8. My work shirt from the night before was wrinkled, but it would have to do. I wasn't ready to explain anything to anyone yet. I just needed normalcy, structure, something that didn't ask me to feel. As I poured coffee into a flimsy foam cup, my phone buzzed again. Different name. Monica, his best friend. The tall blonde who'd been sitting on the left side of the couch the night before. The one who laughed a second too late, like she'd hesitated before joining in. I almost ignored it. Almost. But something in my gut told me this wasn't just another attempt to smooth things over. We need to talk. It's important. About last night. I typed back. About what? 3 dots appeared immediately. Can I call you? I checked the time. 6:23 a.m. Too early for drama. Too early for anything. Fine, I typed. Make it quick. I have work. The phone rang less than 5 seconds later. Hey, Monica said, her voice quieter than I'd ever heard it. Nervous. Thanks for picking up. Go ahead, I said, leaning against the window. The parking lot outside was mostly empty, a semi idling in the corner. She took a breath. What you heard last night, that wasn't just venting. My stomach tightened. What do you mean? She's been planning this, Monica said, for months. I closed my eyes. Planning what? The divorce. The word landed hard. Since February, she continued, she's been talking to a lawyer, documenting things, trying to push you into leaving first. I felt cold all over. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Because what she did was wrong, Monica said, her voice firmer now, and because you need to protect yourself. She wanted you to look like the one who abandoned the marriage. My grip on the coffee cup tightened. She already has a lawyer, Monica added, and she's been building a case, spinning arguments, taking screenshots, setting you up. The room felt smaller. And you're sure? I asked. Yes, she said without hesitation. And I'm recording this call. I'll send it to you. Use it however you need. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to scream. Part of me wanted to laugh at how close I'd come to walking straight into the trap she'd laid. Thank you, I finally said. Really? Just get a lawyer, Monica said. Today, if you can. When the call ended, I stood there for a long moment, staring at my reflection in the glass. The humiliation from the night before was still there, but now it was joined by something else. Clarity. I picked up my phone, typed one message to my husband, and sent it without overthinking. Get a lawyer. I will too. From now on, we communicate through them only. Then I turned the phone off. The shock was over. Now it was time to protect myself. Turning my phone off felt like flipping a switch inside my chest. For the first time since I'd walked into that living room, the noise stopped. No buzzing, no pleading, no accusations layered in apologies, just silence and the steady hum of reality setting in. I got dressed, showered quickly, and stared at my reflection while the water ran. My face looked the same, but my eyes didn't. They were sharper, more alert. like something had finally clicked into place. I had 65 minutes before I needed to clock in, and one call to make. I found the business card tucked into my wallet, edges worn. A coworker, Jake, had given it to me months earlier after his own divorce. Back then, I'd tucked it away like something I'd never need. Thomas Brennan, family law attorney. I turned my phone back on long enough to dial. A receptionist answered on the third ring. Professional. Calm. Like she dealt with emergencies every day. I need to schedule a consultation, I said, as soon as possible. It's urgent. We have an opening this afternoon at 4:30, she replied. Will that work? I thought about my shift, about the warehouse floor, about boxes that didn't care if my life was falling apart. Yes, I said, I'll take it. By the time I hung up, I felt something settle inside me. I wasn't reacting anymore. I was acting. Work helped more than I expected. The rhythm, the noise, the physicality of it. Mark, my supervisor, gave me a look when I clocked in, like he could tell something was off, but he didn't pry. I appreciated that. By mid-afternoon, Monica's recording came through. I listened to it once in my car before the appointment, then sent it to my email, saved it, backed it up, twice. Documentation, evidence, protection. The law office downtown was exactly what you'd expect. Worn carpet, fluorescent lights, clean but unpretentious. Mr. Brennan walked in a couple minutes late, mid-50s, gray hair, glasses, carrying himself like someone who'd seen every trick in the book and wasn't impressed by any of them. So, he said, sitting down, tell me what's going on. I told him everything. The conversation I overheard, walking out, the motel, Monica's call, the months of planning, the strategy to make me look like the one who abandoned the marriage. He listened without interrupting, jotting notes, occasionally nodding. When I played the recording, his expression didn't change, but when it ended, he leaned back. That changes things considerably, he said. It's legal? I asked. One-party consent state, he replied. She knew she was recording. She gave permission, and she's willing to testify. Yes, he nodded. Good, very good. Then we got into the details. Assets, debts, timelines. We rented the house, both names on the lease, 2 bedrooms off Morrison Street. Vehicles were separate. My truck paid off. His Honda still financed. Joint accounts, about $4,000 in savings, maybe $800 in checking. My 401k, $6,000 give or take. His debt, credit cards, store cards, $7,000 total, all in his name. And you've been helping pay them? Mr. Brennan asked. Yes, I said. We were a team. He didn't comment, just kept writing. When we were done, he looked up at me. From this moment forward, he said, document everything. Texts, calls, conversations, screenshot it all. Email it to yourself. Create a paper trail. I nodded. And one more thing, he added. Do not permanently leave the rental yet. Temporary absence is fine. Abandonment is not. Understood. The retainer was $1,500. It was most of my savings, but walking out without protection would have cost me far more. That evening, my phone exploded again. Messages from him, demands, accusations, claims that I owed him a conversation. I sent one reply. Speak to me only through lawyers. Mine will contact you next week. Then I documented everything. I went to the bank, withdrew the retainer from the joint account, took photos, transferred the remaining balance into a new account in my name, legally allowed as long as it was documented. Then I stopped at Target, bought a notebook, pens, a small fireproof box. That night, back at the motel, I started writing. Dates, conversations, arguments, extra shifts, bills I paid, charges that weren't mine. By midnight, my hand was cramping, my eyes burning, but I had pages of truth laid out in ink. My phone buzzed one last time. You're making a huge mistake. I typed back without thinking. The mistake was listening to you tell your friends I wasn't good enough. Thanks for the clarity. Then I blocked his number. The escalation didn't stop there. Friends started reaching out, quietly, cautiously. Rachel, one of the women from that night, called from an unknown number. She tried to get me to lie for her, Rachel said. Said you were controlling, aggressive, that you'd been awful for months. And? I asked. I said no, she replied, because it's not true. She offered to back me up if needed. So did another friend. The narrative my husband was trying to control was slipping through his fingers. Tuesday morning, a process server showed up at the warehouse. Mark handed me the envelope without asking questions. The divorce petition had been filed. My phone rang before lunch. His lawyer. I let it go to voicemail and called Mr. Brennan instead. They want to negotiate, he said. Fast. Good, I replied. Let's hear it. By Thursday, we were sitting across from his attorney, a sharp woman in a tailored suit, going over terms. My husband wanted me to take on his debt. Mr. Brennan shut that down immediately. Absolutely not. With documentation, witness statements, and the recording on our side, the leverage was clear. In the end, we reached a clean split. No spousal support. Each of us kept our own assets. He kept his debt. The lease was broken. Penalties split evenly. It wasn't revenge. It was fairness. When I left the office, something inside me felt steady. The chaos was burning itself out. And for the first time, I could feel the shape of a life forming beyond the wreckage. Not louder, not flashier, just honest. And finally, mine. The paperwork moved faster than my emotions ever could. On paper, everything was becoming clean. Logical, contained. Dates, numbers, signatures waiting to happen. Inside me, though, it felt like standing in the quiet after an explosion. When the ringing in your ears hasn't stopped yet, and you're not bleeding, but you're not sure why that almost feels worse. That night, after the settlement meeting, I didn't go back to the motel right away. I sat in my truck in an empty parking lot, engine off, headlights dark. The city hummed around me, cars passing, distant sirens, people living their lives completely unaware that 5 years of mine had just been reduced to bullet points in a legal folder. This was the part no one warns you about. Not the confrontation, not the anger, not even the betrayal, but the hollow space that comes after you've done everything right. And there's still nothing left to hold on to. I thought about the woman I used to be, the one who believed patience could fix anything, the one who equated endurance with love, the one who stayed quiet because she didn't want to overreact. I replayed moments I had brushed aside. Him scrolling while I talked, his jokes at my expense, the way his friends looked at me like I was an accessory instead of a person. Each memory felt heavier now, stripped of excuses. And for the first time, I let myself ask the question I'd avoided for years. Why did I stay? The answer hurt more than the betrayal itself. Because I was afraid. Afraid of starting over. Afraid of being alone. Afraid that maybe, just maybe, he was right, and I really wasn't enough without being attached to someone else's confidence. I drove back to the motel eventually. The room felt smaller than before. The silence pressed in from every corner. I sat on the bed and stared at my phone, even though there was no one left to text. That's when it hit me. Not anger, grief, raw and unfiltered. I cried harder than I had the night I left. Not because I missed him, but because I mourned the version of myself who had believed in something that never truly existed. I mourned the mornings I woke up early to make sure everything ran smoothly, the extra shifts, the bills quietly paid, the apologies I made just to keep the peace. I mourned the woman who thought love meant shrinking herself so someone else could feel tall. The next day, I went back to the house to grab more of my things, like Mr. Brennan had advised. His car was there. I sat in the driveway for a full 5 minutes, hands on the steering wheel, my heart thudding in my chest, like it didn't want me to go inside. When I did, the house felt unfamiliar. The couch where he'd laughed with his friends, the kitchen where I'd cooked after double shifts, the bedroom where I'd lain awake next to him, wondering why I felt so alone. He came out of the bedroom when he heard me. "You came back," he said, like it was a victory. "I'm getting my things," I replied. We moved around each other like strangers, sharing a space they no longer recognized. He tried again, tears this time, softer voice, promises that sounded rehearsed. "I made a mistake," he said. "One comment. That's all." I looked at him, really looked at him. And for the first time, I didn't feel love, or anger, or even resentment. I felt clarity. "You planned this for months," I said quietly. "You don't get to call it a mistake now." That's when he broke. Not into accountability, but into self-pity. He talked about stress, about feeling stuck, about how hard things had been for him, how unappreciated he felt. I listened and realized something devastating. He was still the center of his own story, even now. I left with my suitcase heavier than before, my chest heavier still. That night was the lowest point. Not because I doubted my decision, but because I finally accepted the truth. The marriage I'd been fighting to save had only ever existed in my effort, and realizing that hurt more than walking away ever could. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling again, tears drying on my temples, feeling emptied out and exhausted. But somewhere beneath the grief, something else was quietly forming. Not hope. Not yet. Just the understanding that there was no going back. And sometimes hitting the bottom isn't about breaking. It's about finally letting go of the illusion that kept you trapped. The shift didn't happen all at once. There was no dramatic moment where I suddenly felt strong, healed, or empowered. No swelling music, no clean emotional break. What changed was quieter than that. It happened the morning after my lowest night, when I woke up without tears on my face for the first time since leaving. The room was the same. The motel curtains still let in too much light. The coffee still tasted like cardboard. But my chest felt different, lighter. Not because the pain was gone, but because it had finally settled into something solid. Something I could stand on instead of drowning in. I checked my phone out of habit. No messages from him. No new chaos. And for the first time, I didn't feel anxious about that silence. I felt resolved. At work, Mark pulled me aside near the end of my shift. "You holding up?" he asked, not as a supervisor, but as a human being. I hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, not great, but steady." He studied my face for a second, then said something simple that stayed with me. "Sometimes steady is the strongest place you can be." That afternoon, I met Mr. Brennan again to finalize details before signing. He slid a folder across the table, updated documents, clean terms, everything outlined clearly. "You did this right," he said. "You protected yourself. Most people don't." I looked down at the papers, at the numbers, the boundaries, the fairness, and suddenly it hit me. For months, maybe years, I had been trying to earn respect from someone who had already decided I was beneath him. I had been negotiating my worth inside a marriage that saw me as expendable. And yet here I was, standing firm, clear-headed, no longer reacting, choosing myself. That realization didn't make me angry. It made me calm. Later that evening, my phone rang from an unknown number. I almost ignored it. Almost. "Hello?" I said. "Linda?" a woman asked softly. "This is Rachel. I don't want to overstep, but I thought you should know." I pulled into a parking spot and turned the engine off. "He's been calling people," she continued, "trying to control the story, saying you were cold, that you worked too much, that you made him feel small." I let out a slow breath. "And?" I asked. "And it's not working," she said. "People are backing away. Monica told me everything, about the lawyer, the planning, the recording." There was a pause. "I just wanted you to know you're not crazy, and you're not alone in this." After the call ended, I sat there for a long time, not feeling vindicated, not feeling triumphant, just grounded. That was the turning point. Not when he lost control of the narrative, but when I stopped caring whether he ever understood what he'd done. I went back to the house one final time, not to argue, not to reclaim anything emotional, just to establish presence, grab the last of my things, and close the door properly. He was there, sitting on the couch, smaller somehow. "You don't have to do this," he said when he saw me. "We could still try." I set my keys down calmly. "You don't try to fix something you've already planned to destroy," I replied. He looked at me like he wanted to argue, then like he wanted to beg, then like he wanted me to save him from the consequences of his own choices. And I didn't, because this time I finally understood something I hadn't before. Walking away wasn't abandonment. It was alignment. Alignment with my values, with my dignity, with the woman I had slowly buried trying to keep a marriage alive by myself. I left without raising my voice, without slamming doors, without needing the last word. Outside, the air felt cooler, clearer. I sat in my car, hands on the wheel, and smiled, not because I was happy, but because I was no longer lost. The power hadn't shifted because he failed. It shifted because I stopped shrinking. And from that moment on, everything that followed, every consequence, every fallout, was no longer something happening to me. It was simply the result of truth finally catching up. The fallout didn't arrive with fireworks. It came quietly, methodically, like gravity doing its job once something loses support. The day the papers were served, I was on the warehouse floor when Mark called me into his office. He didn't say much, just handed me an envelope and nodded once, like he understood more than he needed to say. "You're officially served," he said gently. Process server came by. I thanked him, tucked the envelope under my arm, and went back to work. But my phone didn't stop vibrating. His lawyer called first, then him, from a blocked number. Then messages started pouring in from mutual friends, each one a little more awkward than the last. "Hey, just checking in. Hope you're okay. This whole thing is really messy." Messy for them. Necessary for me. By the end of that week, the story he'd been trying to tell was unraveling. Monica sent screenshots, messages from him asking her to remember things differently, to frame arguments as aggression, to emphasize how cold I'd been, how controlling my finances were. Rachel reached out again. She tried to get me to back her up, she said. I said no, I won't lie. Another friend, Emma, sent a long apology. She admitted she'd laughed that night because she thought it was harmless, because he'd told them for months that I was distant, unloving, difficult. But once we found out about the lawyer, she wrote, and the planning, it didn't sit right anymore. The group that used to gather twice a week stopped inviting him. Not dramatically, not with confrontations. They just faded, one by one. At the settlement meeting, his lawyer tried to hold ground, tried to argue that I should absorb some of his credit card debt, tried to frame his part-time work as a disadvantage he needed support for. Mr. Brennan shut it down with documentation. Bank statements, dates, patterns. The room shifted when the evidence came out. The dinners, the shopping sprees, the spa charges while I paid rent, utilities, groceries, and interest on debt that wasn't mine. The negotiation ended cleanly. No spousal support, no debt transfer, split accounts, lease broken. Each of us responsible for our own mess. When it was over, I didn't feel victorious. I felt finished. The signing happened weeks later. Separate rooms, separate pens, no dramatic final look across a table. I didn't need closure from his face. I already had it. The consequences for him unfolded quickly after that. He moved into a small studio across town, picked up a second part-time job at a coffee shop to keep up with bills. The debt he'd fought so hard to avoid became his alone. Friends stopped calling. The social circle he'd curated, where he was confident, admired, validated, quietly closed ranks without him. I heard about it secondhand. Someone mentioned he'd tried hosting something at his new place. Only one person showed up. I didn't feel satisfaction, just distance. On my side, things were quieter, but steadier. I found a one-bedroom apartment 15 minutes from work. Nothing fancy. Good light, clean lines. Mine. I moved in on a Saturday with help from Mark and Jake, who joked too much and complained about the stairs. This suits you, Mark said, looking around. Feels calm. It was. Work became my anchor. I picked up extra shifts, not to escape, but because I could. Because my energy was finally going somewhere that gave something back. A month later, Mark pulled me aside. Assistant manager position might be opening soon, he said. I'd recommend you. I nodded, surprised by how natural it felt to accept that possibility. Life didn't explode into happiness. It stabilized, and that was enough. The last message I ever received from him came from another unknown number. I hope it was worth it. I stared at it for a long time before typing back. I'm not happy. I'm free. There's a difference. Then I blocked the number, and that was it. No revenge, no speeches, no dramatic confrontation. Just consequences unfolding naturally on the person who tried to play a game with someone who never agreed to be a pawn. And me? I walked forward quietly, carrying nothing that wasn't mine to carry anymore. Healing didn't arrive like a celebration. It arrived in small, ordinary moments that didn't ask for permission. The first morning I woke up in my own apartment. Sunlight spilled across the floor in a way that felt intentional, like it was meant for me, not for a version of my life that had already expired. I stood there barefoot, coffee warming my hands, and realized something simple and profound. No one was disappointed in me. No one was evaluating me. No one was waiting for me to shrink. I had space. The assistant manager position became official a few months later. Better hours, salary, benefits, stability. I'd earned through consistency, not charm. When Mark shook my hand and said, "You earned this," it landed differently than praise ever had before, because I believed it. I bought furniture slowly, pieces I actually liked, nothing rushed, nothing borrowed from a shared life that no longer existed. Each choice felt like a quiet declaration. I'm here and I'm staying. People sometimes ask if I regret walking out that night. The answer is no. What I regret is how long I stayed silent before that moment. How many excuses I made for someone who was already planning my exit while I was still trying to hold the door open. I didn't lose a marriage. I left a situation where respect was conditional and love was performative. And that distinction matters. Here's the lesson I wish someone had told me sooner, one I'm sharing now, in case you need it. You cannot build a future with someone who is secretly preparing for your absence. You cannot love someone into respecting you. And you cannot win a game you didn't know you were playing. But you can walk away with dignity. You can protect yourself without becoming bitter. And you can rebuild something quieter, stronger, and truer than what you lost. Walking out wasn't the end of my story. It was the first moment I stopped letting someone else narrate it. And if you're standing at the edge of a decision that scares you, if you're wondering whether choosing yourself makes you selfish, let me answer that clearly. Choosing yourself doesn't make you cruel. It makes you free.